Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Headline edition will bring you special reports and interviews in a moment.
Reprendre votre thérapie, d'aller en partie. Votre fils a quand même...
Should be consumers.
Live from Radio City, it's the Radio GoGo Show with Adam Go-Rightly.
Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Radio GoGo. This episode will be an old Untamed Dimensions blast from the past, featuring myself, Alan Greenfield, and Synchronos23 from back in the day. Back in the day being like 10 years ago or so, and in the interview we talked primarily of Kerry Thornley, but other things as well related to high weirdness and synchronicities. I did a little bit of editing here and there of this interview just because we, or mainly me, kind of went off on tangents a few times. And then abruptly the interview seems to end at one point in mid-sentence, and now looking back 10 years later in time and space, I have no idea why that happened. Not sure if I lost the tail end of the interview somehow, or when I originally broadcast the interview it had timed out, which sometimes happened back in the old blog talk radio days when I wasn't paying attention to the clock. Whatever the case, here it is.
Blog Talk Radio.
You've just entered Untamed Dimensions. Your navigator for this cosmic adventure is Space Ranger Adam Go-Rightly, captain of the starship Psychopath. Now prepare yourself, Earthlings, for Untamed Dimensions. Greetings, my friends. We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives. And remember, my friends, future events such as these will affect you in the future. You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here. And now, for the first time, we are bringing to you the full story of what happened on that fateful day. We are giving you all the evidence, based only on the secret testimony of the miserable souls who survived this terrifying ordeal. The incident, the places. My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer. Let us punish the guilty. Let us reward the innocent. My friend, can your heart stand the shocking fact about Untamed Dimensions?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you listening out there, wherever you may be listening, from the great American heartland to the pyramidal structures on Mars. You're listening to another startling episode of Untamed Dimensions with me, your host, Adam Go-Rightly, and brought to you as always by our sponsors, the International Jewish Banking Conspiracy, undermining the world's economy since 1840. Tonight on Untamed Dimensions, we welcome Synchronos23 and Alan Greenfield, and the topic of discussion tonight deals with a character, and I do mean character, by the name of Kerry Thornley. The late
Kerry Thornley, a true Renaissance man of the marginal fringe, the forefather of Discordianism, an Oswald double, perhaps, and a Nazi genetic breeding experiment, among many, many other things, and the subject of my book, The Prankster and the Conspiracy, the story of Kerry Thornley and how he met Oswald and inspired the counterculture. Now, first I'll introduce a young lady by the name of Synchronos23, and she has a very cool blog, which we'll give you the URL to at some point. Madam Synchronos is into all kinds of strange and wonderful stuff, and one of her areas of interest is Kerry Thornley. Synchronos23, are you there?
I'm here. How are you doing?
Good. How's things with you?
They're going well.
Very good.
Going to school now, so kind of slowed down on my blog for that, but it's just a year, so I'll post when I can.
Yeah. Hey, and our other guest, who should need no introduction at this point, because he's been on the show, I think this is about his 5th appearance, and he is none other than Bishop Alan Greenfield, noted ufologist and Russ Meyer aficionado. Alan, if you are there, make your presence known.
Okay. I always feel that when I follow Criswell that I'm sort of overclassed and outclassed, but I did know Kerry, so I guess I belong here.
Indeed you do.
But maybe Criswell knew him too, Criswell knows.
Yeah. Hey, folks, as a synchronicity would have it, I was actually contemplating an interview with you two over the last couple of months, as I knew you were friends, and I thought it would be interesting to bring you together to discuss all sorts of magical mojo stuff you're into. But before I could do so, Synchronos23 approached me with the idea of doing a show with Alan and I on Kerry Thornley, so here we go. Why don't you guys bear with me a minute? I'm going to give a little background on Kerry Thornley, which I think is in order. Here we go. Kerry Thornley was born in the late 1930s, 1938 to be exact, and as a teen in the late 50s, he and his high school chum, Greg Hill, used to like to hang out in bowling alleys, and at one such bowling alley, the two had a revelation of sorts, which resulted in the creation of a spoof religion, Discordianism, which since then has continued to blossom in some very weird and wondrous ways. Afterwards, Kerry served time in the Marines, where he became friends with none other than Lee Harvey Oswald, future alleged assassin of JFK, and in fact, Kerry went on to write a novel entitled The Idle Warriors, based on Oswald more than 2 years before the Kennedy assassination, which, as we all know, occurred on November 22nd, 1963. So this is just one of the many oddities surrounding the lives and times of Kerry Thornley. In 1964, LBJ formed the Warren Commission to investigate the assassination, and Kerry became one of the key witnesses for the commission concerning his association with Oswald. In 1965, Kerry's first book was published, called, fittingly enough, Oswald. In the mid-60s, Thornley became actively involved in the counterculture, experimented with psychedelics, helped organize human beings in Griffith Park, and got involved with a free love group into mate swapping. Kerry also began developing his own philosophy during this period, called Zenarchy. Meanwhile, in '67, the Summer of Love, New Orleans DA Jim Garrison launched his JFK assassination investigation, which later became the basis for Oliver Stone's movie JFK. In early '68, Kerry became a suspect in Garrison's probe. Garrison claimed that during the period of time Kerry was in New Orleans in '61 and 1962, he had become involved in a JFK assassination conspiracy directed by our friends at the CIA. Garrison contended that Kerry was an Oswald double, one of the many Oswald impersonators who were running around Dallas and New Orleans prior to the assassination, staging incidents which could later be used against Oswald to portray him as a deranged lone nut commie assassin killer, basically setting him up before the fact. During the course of the Garrison investigation, Kerry discovered that one of Garrison's investigators, Alan Chapman, believed that the assassination had been the work of the Bavarian Illuminati. In response, Kerry decided to mindfuck Garrison by sending out spurious announcements suggesting that Kerry was an agent of the Bavarian Illuminati. The Discordians named this Bavarian Illuminati hoax Operation Mindfuck. Operation Mindfuck went into full swing in late 1968 when Kerry, in cahoots with Robert Anton Wilson, then an editor at Playboy, planted a letter and answer in the Playboy forum spreading the rumor that the Illuminati had been behind all the major political assassinations of the late 1960s. This hoax somehow pressed a magic button, and soon rumors of the Illuminati's existence started appearing in various magazines from the far left to far right of the political spectrum. So in essence, Wilson and Thornley helped set a new mythology in motion in the form of the resurrection of the Bavarian Illuminati, maybe. While all this was going on, the Discordian Bible, the Principia Discordia, was starting to become popular in the counterculture, subculture of the time, and remains quite popular to a gaggle of misfits out there nowadays who inhabit the marginal fringes of the Internet. In fact, a new edition of the Principia Discordia was just published with an afterword by yours truly. During the course of the Garrison investigation, Kerry claimed Garrison's theory was all bunk. Later in the mid-1970s, he began to suspect that Garrison might have been on the right track and that Kerry, had been brainwashed and used as part of a JFK assassination conspiracy, and that the Discordian Society was actually a CIA front that had manipulated him. Whoa. Such speculations were the type of things Kerry had parodied just a few years before, but now he had grown paranoid himself, and now suspected that even Robert Anton Wilson was one of his CIA handlers. To learn the rest of the story, you're just going to have to shell out some hard-earned bucks and buy my book, The Prankster and the Conspiracy. So there you have it, a little background on Kerry Thornley. So let's start with Alan. Alan, how did you come to know Kerry Thornley?
In one of those odd and synchronous ways that one learns to sort of drift with in this general universe that we exist in. First, I should say that on November 22nd, 1963, I was halfway around the world and have witnesses. I was, in fact, in Kibbutz Mabarot in Israel, farming at the time. So that was my alibi, and I'll stick by it till the day I die and maybe beyond.
Has anyone ever suggested you were part of a JFK assassination?
No, but the fact is that, if you've hung around radical circles all your life and know the people who know the people who know the people, it isn't that difficult to get you branded as almost anything, because let's face it, I have been branded as almost everything. But mercifully, in this particular case, I have the most wonderful of alibis. I didn't even hear about it for 3 days. Somebody heard it on the BBC, a girl from Canada by the name of Neely, but spelled like Nile, the river. And she came into my little quarters and informed me that the President of the United States had been killed and the assassin had been killed, and that's how I found out. 3 days later, people say they remember things like Pearl Harbor or whatever they lived through of really great importance, exactly where they were and exactly how they heard. Well, I didn't hear that for 3 days.
So you have your alibi, or your supposed alibi.
Yes, my supposed alibi. But think of this. Perhaps Kibbutz Mabarot, located in the very heart of Israel, is a center of the international Jewish conspiracy. And that was the alibi in order for everyone to think that I was there when really ... pause. But my first encounter with Kerry Thornley was somewhere in the late 1960s, early 1970s. My then acquaintance through the Atlanta Science Fiction Organization, Joe Selko, an interesting character in and of himself, was apparently somewhat involved with Kerry, according to Kerry, and years later, and was given some Bavarian Illuminati stationery. Thought it was the neatest trick since Pop-Tarts, and actually that may have preceded Pop-Tarts, and gave me some, and I guess I helped perpetuate the myth there, although there is some truth in the notion that I am, in fact, a former expelled member of the Bavarian Illuminati, because the origin of that antiquated order of antiquity I used to belong to was a direct outgrowth of Theodore Royce's revival in the 1880s and 1890s of the Bavarian Illuminati, which wasn't too successful, so he changed the name to the Antiquated Order of Antiquity, or whatever they called it. It dims as the time goes by, and that is the origin of that particular modern manifestation of tyranny, oppression, and confusion.
I see.
Years later, I ran into Kerry in a totally different context than most of the people who talk about him, which was having been deeply involved in radical politics. I was out in the middle of the Little 5 Points area of Atlanta, which was then, and to some extent still, a center of radicalism and pestilence, and I was handing out some particular anarchist literature to passers-by, and bumped into another gentleman who was handing out similar literature calling for a universal rent strike, and that was my first encounter with Kerry Thornley, who seemed, by the way, to me, having known him through those political circles, and having known him through those political circles throughout the 1980s and early 1990s anyway, before I really lost track of him, to be a perfectly rational human being, if somewhat more talkative than most. Mm-hmm. I think it depended on the subject matter, what kind of impression one had of him, and I kind of rebel at the notion that he was either a crazy or driven crazy by even those who are admirers of Kerry's that think of him as a divine madman. I'm not so sure that that's an adequate reflection. Talkative, sure, but so am I, and I think I'm probably quite sane, just over-talkative. He would go on, and if you do the proper interview, as I finally managed to arrange through the good offices of Euless Lodge in 1990, if you ask the right questions, and I was relatively uniquely qualified to ask the right questions, everything that he said might or might not have been correct, but it was certainly perfectly rational, reasonable, and more so than some members of the current administration in Washington.
Well, let's get into that interview in a minute. Want to see how Synchronos23 is doing. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was just been looking forward to hearing this story too. So,
hey, the Pop-Tarts came up there a minute ago, and did a quick search on the internet. Developed in the early 1960s and was introduced in 1963, same year as the Kennedy assassination. And originally,
another synchronicity.
Yeah, they were given the name Country Squares originally. So if you're ever on Jeopardy, that knowledge might come in handy.
Yeah.
So
I'm writing it down just in case I'm on Jeopardy.
Me too.
I'll give you guys a moment to write that down. Now, Synchronos23, seems you've become interested in Kerry Thornley for many reasons. You're into synchronicities and Discordianism and stuff. What attracted you to his story?
Well, your book, actually, when you sent that to me, and I didn't really know that he was behind the Prince of Discordia until I read your book. And so that was kind of cool because, I'm kind of new to all this.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all been around a little bit longer than I have. And I've always been a fan of Robert Anton Wilson, and he had referenced him, but I didn't pay no mention, no mind to him. And I just kind of thought it was kind of odd how, all these things that he was writing about were manifesting. And which I call synchronicities because he was, writing it down and putting thoughts out there and emotions into it, and it was making it happen.
Yeah.
And they come off as coincidences, but I don't think that they are. And then when they found the planet Eris, I thought that was kind of kind of neat that they had named their or called their goddess of their religion Eris.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of cool. So that kind of pulled me into it too, because I've been getting into planets and astrology.
Yeah. So, Alan, what was this interview? You conducted it with him, or what was it all about?
I arranged it, and I was, to be honest with you, the way. Actually, let me mention one other synchronicity, and you will recognize it immediately. Apparently, you quote from the interview, unattributed, in your book. Through probably, my guess is you happened to meet Andrew Stevens, yet another member of the conspiracy and an old acquaintance of mine who borrowed the tapes of the interview from me and was the person who transcribed the portions that were not printed in Lashtal, the then official journal, local journal of Euless Lodge, which I happen to be the editor of. Anyway, I arranged the interview with Kerry at the headquarters of Euless Lodge, and Kerry, who knew me through political circles, trusted me as much as he trusted anyone, and we had never had any, conspiratorial problems, but he came into the lodge like he was facing death itself, and this was in the days of the very liberal lodge master, we'll call him Frater Excolari Visionem. He's long since departed that scene. And there's a guy named Weardsley, who is a beat poet who doesn't like me, and myself, and he looked around, and, there was a television and a huge occult library, and we sat down at a table, turned on a tape recorder, and he seemed to relax into it, and it became a very long and very complex review of mostly of his ideas, and I think he felt much more comfortable, possibly because of my presence. I asked most of the questions. In fact, it's very hard for me to identify any here that were asked by anybody else, simply because while they're unattributed in the in Andrew's transcription, nevertheless, certain of these questions would not have been asked by either of the other two people there, simply because it was not in their area of interest or expertise. Occultists tend to be confined to the occult, and actually the thing you quote speaks to that. If I can, is a boring quote risky or not?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Feel free. I want to state that if I did quote from your interview, it was unwittingly. When I met with Andrew, he was in the process of putting the book together that was going to have that interview in it, but I don't think that ever bore any fruit. So it might have been what I quoted from your interview was something I found on the internet somewhere, is my guess, that wasn't really attributed to anybody.
With me, I only remark on it in passing. It was on page 227, but I saw it and I thought, this looks familiar. And then I thought, hey, no wonder it looks familiar. It's in response to a question I asked him. But it's a good question, and it really points to where Kerry was coming from. Because, again, I knew him as primarily a political radical, specifically an anarchist and anarcho-syndicalist, to be exact. And much of the interview, he defines very closely what he is, and his views were very similar to my own. The other aspects are, obviously, he's had a profound influence on Discordianism and on spin-offs, if that's a fair term, like the Subgenius Foundation, and on writers like Wilson and Shea, and who is himself an anarchist, Shea that is, and other influences he's thought to have influenced Green Ag and the occult movement. Anyway, so I wanted to ask him about that. So I said, at very near the beginning of the interview, Kerry, let me ask you about, I think we kind of discussed this on the phone. I have an unusual impression of you in this regard. It seems to me that you've had a profound influence on radical political circles on the one hand, and you've had a very profound influence on chaos magic, metaphysical, spiritual circles. the far, far deep, off the end of the New Age type people. Yet I have the impression you're really not part of either of those worlds. How does it feel to be a legend in your own time in worlds that you're not a part of? And he said, I actually am a radical anarchist. And then this part was what you quoted on page 227, I think. My influence on the occult has been exaggerated. I've never quite understood why it's like this, but there's a book called Drawing Down the Moon that credits me with founding the neo-pagan movement in the United States of America. I got into neo-paganism in 1966, I guess it was, very briefly, and then I took an acid trip that was just a terrible bummer. And the next day we went down to the beach, and there were some guys with us with a skull on a post sitting around beating drums, and made me go on a complete bummer about paganism for years afterwards, and that's where your quotation ends. But he also said, in the meantime, I'd written a little mimeograph thing for Teresa, which, what's the name? Hello?
Hello?
I'm still here.
I'm still here, too.
Perhaps we should redial. Old Synchronous.
I'm still here. I just got a lot of noise, static.
Hello?
Hello?
Adam? Earth to Adam? Earth to Adam?
I guess we lost you.
I guess it's just you and me and no audience whatsoever, or perhaps we're being broadcast. I suggest we redial.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, folks. Hello.
The secret of eternal life, but I guess the audience will never get to hear it now.
I didn't hear about a minute there of the dialogue because I lost connection, but I'm back. You guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. Synchronos23, are you there?
I suggested she dial back after we got through discussing the assassination of Ferdinand Marcos, but of course he wasn't assassinated, so we're on safe ground there.
Okay, well, I see, oh, here she is. Synchronos23. You are there, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I'm a little quiet tonight. I'm tired. I'm sorry.
I thought I lost you. I lost connection there for a minute. So
the men in black are everywhere, Adam, and they'll cut off just when you're talking about Kerry's connection to the international conspiracy.
Yeah. Exactly. they seem to follow you around, Alan.
Well, I don't know. You know, that's something that I actually asked Kerry about in the interview. As we got into the material that is so familiar to you from your book, and I must say you really do thoroughly go into the Kennedy assassination business and the connection with the Garrison investigation and so forth. And I did find out a number of things that I didn't know because, frankly, in the 1980s we were on to other issues, and that was not a daily conversation piece, fortunately. And if we did know something about that, it was considered unwise even to use one's own given name. We all had names of our own except Kerry, who was just too well known, and he was the best dishwasher in the neighborhood, so he was pretty safe.
And really that's when I got into the Kennedy assassination, was the late 80s.
Is this a confession?
And I really think that's why I got into it so heavily in the book, because I had so much knowledge about it. But there was times where I thought I might have been overdoing it, that it leaned too heavily towards the Kennedy assassination, but it was definitely an important part of Kerry's reality.
Oh yeah, he would tend towards talking about that subject. In fact, if you don't mind, I wanted to mention something about why a lot of people may have thought that Kerry was more bonkers than I believe that he was. As you know, I've had a lot of training in dealing with UFO-related contact cases and so forth, and I have interviewed gazillions of people, well, maybe not gazillions, but many, many people that have had close encounter experiences, and it certainly is an intense experience, and like a car wreck or an encounter with the divine, it's going to leave somebody with a certain amount of things that are difficult to express. And one of the things that I had learned long ago, long before I met Kerry, to do was to let people express themselves and not try to fit them into a linear zone. There was this sort of little test thing that one did to see if a person was functional or dysfunctional as a human being. But beyond that, you let them tell their story in their own way. And Kerry was an associative thinker. Most of us are linear thinkers. And it is very, very difficult unless you cultivate a talent for cross-referencing and just sort of letting the story go as it's going to go and only interrupting if you lose track of it to ask a question, that you're able to find out whether what someone is saying internally makes sense, whether it's ultimately correct or not, or whether it does not. And Kerry was definitely an associative thinker, and if he got into the assassination story loop, that's where he would go and would occasionally shift into some other area, and then that just struck him by association as of interest. And then if you asked about that area, he would go into that area in some detail. And by doing that, I've done that with a lot of quite sane, functional people who nevertheless have very unusual backgrounds and unusual stories. I would be amazed with the life that Kerry lived. If he weren't somewhat of an unusual person, the question is, was he a dysfunctional person? As far as I can see, at no time in his life, really. He may not have looked after his health as well as he should have, but he nevertheless tended to be gainfully employed at the level that he chose, was a self-actualized person, and an inventor of many brilliant things. He used to write for my magazine Fourth World and wrote hilarious pieces that were clearly intended to be hilarious and satirical. And when we talked about political matters, he had radical but perfectly viable ideas. So I just don't find it to be, it's a superficial analysis to say because someone has an odd view, they ipso facto are off the deep end.
Well, a lot of his closest friends thought he went off the deep end for a period of time.
Perhaps because they are linear thinkers, or at least have not had the same life experiences that I have with dealing with people who have had close encounters with the what's it, whatever that particular what's it happens to be, and that it changes you. People that come back from a war with post-traumatic stress have to be dealt with, or should be dealt with properly. They not always by the VA or anybody, but they should be dealt with according to the circumstances of their experience. If you don't, then you probably are doing them a disservice. And I think that to expect someone who has seen people killed and maimed and perhaps participated in that yourself to act in the same manner that they did prior to that is an unrealistic expectation.
True. Synchronos23, you have any thoughts thus far?
Yeah, I was going to add that, I think that people get labeled as being obsessed or crazy when they have like a general interest in it, where it becomes like part of their existence and their reality. And I think it just, I don't think we should put them in little boxes and label them as dysfunctional because of that. Everybody has a different interest, and if we were all the same, then it'd be a boring world, And that's kind of the way I see it too. I think a lot of these, conspiratory writers, cling on to the legend and kind of get lost in it. They get lost in their own illusion of it, or their own thoughts of what they thought happened, and kind of run off with that. And all these legends and lore get formed off of that, just like the Bavarian Illuminati bit. It was totally satirical, and it became, underground culture mythology, like you were saying,
Yeah. Now, you were talking earlier about synchronicity. I think Alan was talking about this, how you can make it work for you, but can it work against you at times?
Yeah, I think so. I think that you can be your own worst enemy, and if you get kind of lost in these thoughts, that you can make all this stuff manifest, so like your crazy thoughts or your illusions or delusions, and you can kind of get lost in that and have a hard time returning back to sanity, and function in this world.
Yeah, I think there might have been some element of that in Thornley's life. I'm not one to throw out the term crazy willy-nilly, but there was some concerns even from Robert Anton Wilson for a period of time that he thought that Kerry had become too deeply wedded to his conspiracy theories.
Well, I mean, I knew Bob Wilson as well, and with due respect to the recently deceased, one could sit down with Bob and talk for a while and reach the conclusion that the little burned holes in his left pocket represented something in the way of delusional behavior. He had his own pretty weird take on things at times, and also tended to. And this is not an attack on him. In fact, he was always very kind to me. But I met him through ufology, that is Wilson, not through politics as I met Kerry, and. We went through a series of things where the ancient order of antiquity and so forth, he knew me through that, which was another interest of his, but he always called me the UFO guy. And whenever I would see him, it didn't matter where, we were both speaking at a convention or doing autographs or whatever it was, I was always the UFO guy. He once saw me do a Gnostic Mass. I came out of the Mass and he said, "How did you like that?" And he said, "You didn't mention Adam Weishaupt." And I said, well, he's not one of the italicized. I was trying to explain the technique, and he said, well, you did well for the UFO guy, or, something to that effect. And I thought, I will always be the UFO guy.
So even Wilson got trapped in reality tunnels.
Well, we all do. I mean, the question is, did Kerry go on and on about certain things in his life? Well, yeah, of course. But did that mean that he was wrong to do so, possibly strategically wrong because it got him labeled in a certain way. If we present ourselves in a certain way, we can be absolutely bonkers, but get elected to high office. I mean, Hitler was said to be a very persuasive speaker. That doesn't mean that he was A, sane, or B, a person telling the truth. He simply was persuasive. Kerry discredited himself unintentionally by talking about the subjects that probably had the highest impact on his life. And yet, if you got him on the history of anarchism, I would say he was among the foremost well-read persons that I have ever met, and I've met any number of very famous people in that movement. He was so well thought of, Adam, in local anarchist circles here, and this is mostly people who, they're not interested in UFOs or paranormal phenomena or anything. That they're people that work union jobs and have an unusual political perspective. We rented some buses to go to Chicago to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Haymarket police riot in Chicago. In fact, we wound up sort of reproducing it. But as we loaded the buses, somebody said, "Where's Kerry Thornley?" And nobody could find him. And the buses toured the neighborhood, toured Little Five Points, looking for Kerry to pick him up, to take him with us. For, I would say, an hour and a half before we actually headed out for Chicago. And that gives you some idea of with what reverence he was held in that circle. And that was a circle of people that probably I was the only one who had ever read the Principia Discordia. So there's there's more than one side to Kerry that often is missed. And if you read this interview, while he goes on at some length about things, nevertheless, there's not an incoherent word in the whole thing, except maybe from me. And that's a different problem.
You know, it's interesting. After I finished the book and it was published, different people were contacting me with more stories about Kerry, specifically a lot of the time in Little 5 Points that I didn't cover, and I was actually thinking of writing another book called Kerry and Little 5 Points. Other things have happened since then. I kind of put that to the side, but he was really thought highly of there and still is in Little 5 Points.
I once wrote a long essay about Little 5 Points. I lived there for a while until the roaches evicted me. But I mean, I woke up on the curb one day. They just threw me. No, not exactly that bad, but I really did live on McClendon Avenue, not maybe in the same building Kerry lived in, actually, at one time, but that would have been another Synchronous thing. And that is not the original hippie neighborhood in Atlanta. That would be the old 14th Street district, which coincided with Haight-Ashbury exactly, and the East Village in New York. I mean, they were the same period of time. It migrated to Little 5 Points and has gone out to the what's known as the Platte Shoals area of Atlanta, but Little 5 is still a countercultural area, and much has gone on there, from a solar car dealership to plans for revolution that seem to make a lot of sense. And the name of my essay was Socialism in One Neighborhood.
Let me ask you, you were mentioning UFOs and Kerry Thornley kind of in the same breath. Did you ever talk with Kerry about UFOs?
No, I don't think that it ever came up. I did talk to him about whether he was actually interested in magic and metaphysics and things of that sort, but not specifically UFOs. And he pretty much said no, that it was not really an interest of his. And his most famous saying, which certainly didn't originate with me, although he did say it to me. He said, if I had the spoof to do over again, I would have chosen Venus instead of Eris, because I'm much more in favor of sexuality than I am of chaos.
Yes.
And I thought, well, we are kindred spirits. What can I say?
Hey, I have a chat room here. There's some people in there. If they want to ask any questions, they can. And one person in the chat room is named Adam Greenfield. That's pretty interesting.
Sounds like an assumed name to me.
Okay. Yeah. Could be. Hey, one question, kind of swerve away from Kerry Thornley here. I think I've asked Alan this, but Synchronos23, have you ever seen a UFO? Had a UFO experience?
No. No. Nope, I haven't. Sorry.
And let me ask you this: how was Alan involved in your wedding?
He was, I guess, a witness for a wedding, and he did a reading for us from, I don't know if I'll pronounce this right, Khalil Gibran. Can you pronounce it for me, Alan? I'm sorry.
Khalil Gibran.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm like one of the book people, but I don't really do well with phonics. And there's not a lot of people around here that you can actually have a conversation with about this stuff, because I'm in the deep south and Bible Belt.
Yeah. They don't know about that Khalil Gibran out there.
No, they don't. They were like, what?
The author of the Prophet. Yeah, that had a profound effect on me when I read it back many, many years ago, dating myself. But, powerful author.
It's commonly given out at weddings. It's considered to be an appropriate thing to do, and my dear friend Bishop Crow invited me to assist at Synchronous's wedding with her beloved husband, and I was honored to do so, and we managed to get in some of our magical hoo-ha, too, as well.
I had a good time. Yeah, I was going to mention that. I think that John did a really good job, and it was everything that I'd wanted, and we got to do it on 777, which is something that I'd always hoped for because I have a thing with that number. And we did it at the 23rd hour, 23rd minute, 23rd second, or tried to get real close to 23rd second.
We actually did it. We were in progress. I was looking at the clock part of the time when John was reading the ceremony, and it was...
Yeah, pretty close. We had timed it pretty good. Our delay was getting Mr. John Sellers on the phone. He wouldn't hush up so I could do my wedding march. So... it was kind of funny. I've got it all on video. I need to post it on YouTube so I can watch it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's different. But,
yes, definitely.
Yeah, we had In Slaughter Natives as our wedding march song.
Kerry would have appreciated it, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely different. And I had to fight with my husband not to use a kitty cat when he went to consecrate me, with the crosses. And I was like, no, John would get upset if you used the cat puppet, He was going to go meow, because he's the Discordian. So, yeah, I was like, well, let's be a little bit serious for this one. But it was good. It was nice, and my son was there, and, had a good time. And we returned in October, and I was, I guess, brought up to consecrated as a bishop. And Ecclesia Gnostic Universalis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. And we got to go to the Dalai Lama Peace Talks, and that was pretty awesome. Get to be a part of that at Emory, and get to witness that, and I had a good time. So
you mentioned you're a bishop. I'm a high priest in the Bavarian Illuminati. And I was given this honor by Robert Anton Wilson.
Well, you can't go any higher than that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Because I asked him, would you appoint, or first I asked him, the rumors all those years were he was like some head of the Illuminati, so I asked him one time, are you the head of the Illuminati? And he said, no, I'm the toe. That didn't stop me from asking him if he would appoint me a high priest, and he did, and so it is.
Well, that's cool. Get the official.
Well, use
the Grand Poobah.
In good health. And so don't forget to run a wedding scam. It's worked for Kirby Hensley. It might as well work for you.
Yeah, we got this group out here in Central California. They're the ones that will give you, make you a minister via the internet. It's the
Universal Life.
Yep, they're right nearby me here, and I'm also a minister with them as well. So
I am so. And Missouri's passed a new law where you have to register your church before you can perform any weddings or anything like that. So I've yet to do that, but kind of have a strange name for my lodge, and so I don't know if they would take me serious or not. So
I also have a cat who's a minister too, but that's another story.
Yeah. Hey, do you partake of the Church of Last Day Thursdayism?
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, that's a spoof religion about the dirty litter box, so you might want to check that one out. The eternal dirty litter box.
Well, these are all subjects near and dear to Kerry Thornley's heart. Having a wedding that revolves around the number 23 and spoof religions and such. You're talking about that quote of Thornley's, and I got one guest here saying, can we hear the quote so rudely interrupted by the amorphous sound blob? I guess a...
Well, how much of it did we hear? They should buy your book and look on page 227.
There you go.
But I'll be glad to repeat it with the part that I think that got left out was where he commented on the after the quote that you give. It says, in the meantime, I'd written a little mimeograph things for Teresta, which with the name I got a hold of, Green Egg got a hold of it, and they used it. And that is true, and Green Egg was very kind to me for many years in publishing my stuff. That's the Zell's magazine and the magazine of the Church of All Worlds. not the original as in Heinlein, but the real world resemblance there too. And Kerry was essentially saying they simply borrowed it, and he was flattered by it, but not being a censor and not feeling dissed by that. It's like my Wicca piece, which has been printed and reprinted, and some people sell it as an e-book, and people have spoken to me and say, "Aren't you indignant about that?" And I think, no, it's the height of flattery. I mean, if they're going to make a few bucks, and as long as they print my name right and they accurately reflect what I said, why should I be offended? I mean, the free flow of information is the greatest thing I know of that has happened, and the internet is largely responsible for it, and I'm all for it.
We're certainly in a new age here, and that, with the whole music sharing and revolution that happened, and, people got into an uproar about that, but I think, with Napster and these type of things, it really exposed a lot more people out there to music that probably wouldn't have heard it. The internet has done that with a lot of authors, such as myself, working on the marginal fringe. So, a lot of times I don't necessarily care if I'm getting ripped off if my name and I'm just getting out there and I'm getting a little more exposed.
Well, it's certainly my attitude. I mean, I do write for a living, and I like at least the first edition of something to get my fair share of. But the primary thing is that I guess I'm a message person more than a profit person, and that's Profit. I'm certainly not the other kind. And I'm much more concerned with seeing to it that my ideas get full expression than I am with any return on it. Because I go back to the early fanzine days when all of this was done entirely just for fun, and there was no expectation of any money involved. It was done because we wanted to be self-expressing, and it was in some ways a lot better back then.
That's what I like about the internet too, is that we get to become the media now with all these different sites, and we can put up our blogs and post little commentaries, and everybody can become a journalist, and they just kind of basically take back the media. Who would want to watch regular TV when you got all that going on? So
well, the initial outcry was these aren't serious journalists. It's not legitimate, but
I get told that often.
The major medias are legitimate anymore or have any relevance?
I think it's all lies, so that's why I don't even listen to it. I'd rather listen to what other people are saying. But my biggest thing with the internet is that we're getting to cut out the middleman. We can go through each other with all these file sharing applications and with PayPal and stuff, and you can set it all up and cut corporate world out. That sounds great to me. But I won't get into that. I'll leave it at that.
Until they shut us down.
Well, that's the whole thing that I'm concerned about. I don't think the internet is immune, and so far so good. But don't think that it isn't a struggle. And I do use and am part of the Blue Ribbon campaign because I feel like keeping the internet free, even though that's going to mean that there are going to be Nazi sites and hate sites and other sorts of things, is a lot better than having 3 or 4 people of the...
That's all, folks.
This has been a Film Waste presentation, darling.